And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and everybody in between. We are here for another episode of Inside CKP. And before I introduce my guest tonight, let me go ahead and pay the bills. This show and every show is brought to you by Chris Kennedy Publishing. You can find them at chriskennedypublishing.com for all your literary needs: military, sci-fi, fantasy, space opera, you name it, they've got it. They even have a smattering of romance, but not a lot. And go there for all your needs. Of course, if you want to support this show and Chris Kennedy Publishing, you can do so at their Patreon. Just Google Chris Kennedy or pull this up here. Going back to their website, if you haven't done so already, sign up for their newsletter. If you're waiting to find stuff online, any kind of news or anything like that, you might miss something. So sign up for the newsletter to get all your news, and you get free stories, and you could become a pre-reader potentially. Of course, you can find them on Amazon. Please like and follow and rate, and it helps out a lot. A lot of the news you'll find on Chris Kennedy Publishing. There's also a fan page for all the fun and shenanigans. And of course, if you've made it this far, you know we have a YouTube channel, and you can like and subscribe there as well. And without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Mike Jack Stoumbos here with us today. Welcome, Mike. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well, Jeremy. How about you?
All right. Well, let's get the business out of the way and tell people where they can find you online.
Yeah, best place to find me, other than some of the through CKP links that you've already seen, is MikeJackStoumbos.com. A lot of the rest of the stuff is going to be connected to that. So MikeJackStoumbos.com. I'm on Facebook. My author page is Mike Jack Stoumbos. And then the big one that we're pushing right now is I've currently got a Kickstarter going on. And the Kickstarter is a little bit of a longer URL, but if you go into Kickstarter and you look for the WonderBird Press anthologies, or if you look for Murderbugs, you'll find it. And if you're connected to the CKP author community, you'll probably see some extension of Murderbugs on Facebook if you look for hashtag Murderbugs there.
Awesome. Well, and I've also put the link in the comments, and you can find it in the description as well.
Thank you.
All right. So, Murderbugs, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So, but you did a previous Kickstarter, right? And
yeah,
that was Murderbirds.
Yep. Yeah. So last year we did the Murderbirds Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
It's we call it the Unhelpful Encyclopedia series. The idea is that we're just basically going to take an animal category and give you a bunch of stories about that animal and intent to kill. So bit of a science fiction, fantasy, or horror twist on each of the stories, but most of them inspired by real world birds in the first case, and this one bugs. Last time we did 20 stories. We've got another 20 lined up this time around. And it's been a lot of fun. There was a lot of really good reception for Murderbirds, and so we're like, cool, let's continue the series. We're at least going to do 3 of them. So we did, Murderbirds the first time. We're doing Murderbugs now, and then the preview ahead. Our next one is going to be Murderfish.
Oh, really?
I'm already coming up with a sort of a wish list of these are some of the weirdest fish I've ever heard of. I would love to get some of them into this encyclopedia and see how they show up.
All right, so no mammals, just the fish.
The mammals will be okay. We'll have a lot of wiggle room for sea creatures in general. So
Okay.
So yeah. So if somebody has a good dolphin story or a good Cnidarian story, Cnidarian with a silent C is the technical term for jellyfish. Weird things you find out when you're researching this stuff. But anyway, yeah. So, or I don't know, maybe somebody has a sea turtle story in mind. I'm pretty open. One of the big ones that popped up recently, I found out that there's a fish called a sarcastic fringe head. I'm not making this up. It's a fish called a sarcastic fringe head.
Mm-hmm.
And if you search for it, if you do an image search, especially if you are looking for any kind of moving clips or whatever, it is super weird. It's kind of freaky. If you're at all freaked out by fish or anything that looks like it's turning into some kind of monster before your eyes, this is a good example of one. So yeah, the sarcastic fringe head, real fish.
So before we get to the bugs, let's talk about the birds. What were some of the freaky things that came out of these authors for the Murderbirds?
Well, so we ended up doing 3 stories that were somewhere in the crow or raven variety. So we definitely needed to hit that part first. And on the crow and raven, there was one of them that was a direct like allusion to Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. And that story was written by Martin Shoemaker and it was really, really funny. So definitely go on the humor approach there. There was one of them that was a little bit like darker and introspective. It was called An Unkindness, and it was about a swarm of ravens as a harbinger of death. And just, you know, a swarm of ravens is following somebody along like a family road trip, and it felt very much like a, you know, Stephen King, The Stand, early portions where it's like being haunted by a bird. And then the third one was a sort of mythical creature, sort of a like cursed raven witch goddess thing. And it's like it's hard to describe without going into it with spoilers, but basically if you like, you know, dark sword and sorcery fantasy where it seems like the swords and the sorcery are really working against the good guys and they're trying to like, you know, take on Celtic goddesses that are too big for them. And that was a cool one to do. That one's called Give One to the Soul. And it's by a, you know, UK author, Michael Panter, who's very clever, very good at like, you know, getting you right in there into that lore. So those were really fun on the birds.
Well, and ravens are creepy to begin with, not just because of past stories and everything, but they're so damn smart. And that makes them scary because it's an animal that, I mean, they use tools and they do all that stuff, and that can lend to being pretty creepy if you're a good storyteller.
One of the most fun stories to illustrate was the owl one. So, you know, another smart bird, and it was called Taking Flight on Bone Shard Wings.
Ooh,
and
nice name.
Yeah, very much like a folkloric take on owls, but since it was so focused on the bone, I went to the Smithsonian and I found an owl skeleton that was set up there to use as sort of like the model for the illustration. It was just a very fun thing to be able to do and to make make pop on the page as much as possible.
Speaking of illustration, do you? I think we've talked about this in the past when you've been on the show, but do you tend to like for your own story or even some of the other stories? Do you draw out some of the animals and stuff?
Yeah. Usually, if I'm gonna be describing something a lot, I want to get a sense of what it looks like. I want to have kind of a go-to image. So I like to do a lot of concept art, and sometimes I'll do like basically stage diagrams, or I'll draw out the room that something takes place in. I'll figure out who's standing where in relation to one another because that makes it much easier for me to keep track of. The Murderbirds and Murderbugs anthologies are the first times that I've really gotten a chance to like take, you know, my art and put it into, okay, let's make it a finished form, publishable illustration. I mean, I've done, you know, I've done like D&D character commissions and stuff like that. It's a ton of fun. Not knocking it at all, but it's, you know, it's kind of a different, it's a different feel. Yeah. So yeah,
Are you
right now? I'm working on some of the illustrations behind the scenes as well.
awesome? So are you a fast artist, or does it take you a while to get these to like publication ready art?
I've been told that I'm fast. Now I'm not doing a lot of like, I'm not doing any color work. Usually I try to avoid that because I don't think that I have a very good eye for it. So for me, it's mostly either like pen and ink or it's graphite. And then then I take it, I scan it, and then I use whatever kind of photo manipulation tool to remove any smudges. So I erase the smudges and I set up the contrast, and that's about it. And actually here, I'm not sure how well this will pop on the screen, but
oh no, I can see it. That's awesome.
So this is one of my favorites from Murderbirds. Just for like, this was just, you know, graphite on page, and it scanned really well, and then I was able to just change up the contrast and call it good.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so some of them go pretty fast. Some of them take a while. Some of them I will sit and belabor for a long time, and some of them it's like, cool, I can turn on an episode of something, and it's almost like just relaxation time. I just get to draw.
Well, and someone like me, I am not artistic at all. You know, I tried drawing when I was a kid, and all the guys were, you know, bodybuilders, and the feet were pointing straight out and the hands were like this, and you know, it just never went anywhere for me. You know, it wasn't any good. So I can always appreciate it when somebody's really good at drawing. Like if I'm on social media and somebody's showing themselves drawing something, and they're just doing it so well. It's like I will go down that hole for hours. Um, and but and I get why you do it, because again, I'm not an artist or anything, but visual, it's very, very helpful. Like me, if I'm watching a movie and I know there's a book out about it, I will definitely watch the movie first, because the book's probably going to be better. But that movie helps me visualize the book so much better. And so, and my twin brother and I joked that we call the book the DVD extras. And well, and I'm aging myself because I said DVD, but
I don't know if that's aging too much. I mean, like, yeah.
But it's very helpful, and then you get so much more detail out of the books. But the movies or graphic novels or whatever just help you with that visualization, and helps your imagination so much more. So I definitely get why you do that. And now, do you do anything with the art? Do you sell the art or anything like that?
Not much. I will be honest on that one. That's not something that I know much about. So
Okay.
usually with the art prints, I just bring them with me to conventions and stuff. And so when I'm selling the books, it's like, cool, buy a book and you'll get a free art print. And that just tends to be fun. So if somebody's drawn in by, maybe they see the skeleton of the owl across the room and they come in to check that out,
Mm-hmm.
and then we get to talking about Murderbirds, they get the print of the owl, or vice versa. They're drawn in by Murderbirds cover, and they get that. And then I also do the same with the This Fine Crew series. So
Okay.
I keep the core 4 characters, their portraits on display, and often if somebody wants to get a This Fine Crew book, they're going to be intrigued by one of the characters, one of the core 4 This Fine Crew folks. Usually it's the Uplift Cockroach. Usually it's Paul Newman. That catches the eye. Yeah, got a much smaller stack of those than the rest of them.
Well, speaking of, here's the book covers for that series.
Mm-hmm.
Great book covers, by the way.
Yeah.
And but going back to the Kickstarter, what was the catalyst to do the first Kickstarter and now the second one? What made you start doing that?
Yeah. So some of this is just like having been involved in different anthologies in various forms over the last few years. So I definitely got a lot of my start in the fiction writing world, writing short stories. And then to try to get to know more of that world, I would volunteer to be a slush reader or selection reader
Mhm.
for different places. And so it's been a bit of a range, but this has all been on a volunteer basis. It's not like I can say that I had done this professionally until I got to, my own.
Mhm.
And so, I also got to hear the things that were working for people, the things that weren't working for people, the things that people said, they felt like they didn't get enough visibility or they didn't get enough community buy-in.
Mhm.
And I also got to talk to a lot of authors along the way who were part of anthologies. And frequently the authors were like, well, I sent the story and it got accepted. And that's cool. But then I never even found out anything else that happened with it. It just someday it was out there.
Oh wow.
And I'm like, well, that's kind of silly. Let's see what we can do about this. Let's see if we can get,
Mhm.
an ongoing process. And then, I talked to people about what had worked for them in the Kickstarter world. And I did that with Murderbirds. I wanted to see if cool, can we rally together some of the community? And there are a lot of really good involved overlapping communities in the author front, but at the same time, it's hard to tell what's out there from whom. It's hard to tell which project is going to launch when and stuff like that. But Kickstarter is a nice landing page for that. It's a good place for just to be able to easily direct folks and be like, yes, this is what we're working on. And so I kind of like that. I kind of like it as just an advertising pre-sale platform.
Mhm.
And I like it because it's a good way to get sort of group cheerleading going
Yeah.
on an upcoming book. And especially for an anthology where it's it's not just me, it's me and 20 authors. And yeah, I don't know. I think
So
I'll keep doing it in some form.
so where did the idea for so would you describe these anthologies as horror anthology or science fiction or both, or?
Well, so I go with themed anthologies when I'm at conventions. So I say themed anthology, birds with intent to kill, and sci-fi, fantasy, or horror twist.
Okay.
And that's kind of the way I go. And depending on who I'm talking to, sometimes I'm talking to somebody who's definitely leaning in fantasy, and then I'll recommend a certain story from there that leans more fantasy. But it's a bit of a mix. So yeah, we've got like usually about a third fantasy, a third science fiction, and a third that are somewhere in the weird category that have horror elements. And then along with that, for tone, we've got a third of them that are fairly lighthearted and humorous, because it's called Murderbirds. We're not taking it too seriously. I love creature features. I love, like, B-movie renditions of, like, oh no, here is this specially suddenly evolved animal that's going to try to take us all out. Those are great. I mean, like, I will watch plenty of shark movies. I'm that kind of guy.
You watched The Meg?
Yeah. And then, and then we've got like a third of them that are like, they're suspense, and then a third that are once again kind of weird. They're going to give you maybe a little bit of the horror vibe, or a little bit of like the mind twist kind of vibe. And between those, I feel like we hit a lot of a range of what people are going to look for in these kinds of stories. And in terms of how far to go horror wise, we tell the authors when they're submitting, it's like you can go for like horror elements, but by the end of the story, we don't want people to feel like they need to go cry in the shower. We're not going for traumatize the reader horror, but include horror elements. And even if you have an unhappy ending, but like that's where we go.
And so 20 stories in the first one, and 20 stories in the second one, right? And, well, yeah, I could see you're gonna have a range. You're gonna have thriller. You're gonna have horror or sci-fi. So again, and I might have asked this already, and I apologize. Why Murderbirds and Murderbugs? What was the antithesis or the catalyst for that idea?
Yeah. So some of this is because I like creature features. And a part of it, I don't really know how to describe the why behind all this without mentioning a whole ton of books. But I'm going to boil it down to like sort of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So in Hitchhiker, first of all, I love the book. One thing that I wish was in there more were the excerpts from the guide. Like, I really like these little clips that tell you like how and why to do something in the universe. So like, my parents used to love going for like nature walks and stuff, and so it was great to go out, see animals, so on and so forth. And we would see these signs, and there are some mundane signs like don't feed the ducks. There are also some like more ridiculous signs about like don't make eye contact with a moose and stuff like that. And there's, you want to know the story behind it. I want to know exactly what happened, and then I want to exaggerate the crap out of it. So it was kind of a combination of those feelings. Like, so if you take creature feature, if you take like irreverent guidebooks like Hitchhiker, if you take like I want to know the story behind this sign, and all of these little ideas were kind of floating around in various journals. I'd kept journals of like different themed anthologies that I felt like I hadn't seen a lot before, and I would just start mentioning them in writer groups. So whenever I would, especially when I'd host like write-ins where people would come and try to jam out as many words as they could, I would mention these things and just like see the crowd reaction. And I got the most laughs and the most like story ideas and discussions from Murderbirds. So I'm like, okay, that's one to start with. Yeah. And we're actually doing two anthologies with this Kickstarter. We're doing both Murderbugs, and we're starting the Monstrous Guidebook, the Vampire Survival Guide. And the Vampire Survival Guide is another part of that set that I had kind of always wanted to see in the realm of anthologies. I had always wanted to see like a guidebook not written for humans and how humans survive them. Once again, zombie survival guide, Max Brooks, yay, wonderful. Yeah. But when I first picked it up, I thought it was going to be a survival guide for zombies learning to survive humans. I was only minorly disappointed. So for the Vampire Survival Guide, it's all stories about vampires and how they survive humans. Like, how do they live to be 200? Because in the TV shows, they make tons of stupid mistakes. They should not survive to be 200. But I kind of like the idea of like, if you're a vampire who's climbing out of the grave for the first time, having a mentor who can hand you a book and say, here, this is everything you need to know. And that idea is just funny to me. So so we're doing the Vampire Survival Guide, and we'll continue from there and do the Werewolf Survival Guide next year.
Well, what a great day to do this episode on Friday
Yeah.
the 13th and in October of all months. So well, so that one I'm especially interested in that one because I love vampire stories, always have, and it's I've just always been fascinated with, especially with the immortality
Hmm.
aspect of it is and to what you're talking about in these stories is like how do they evolve because they are born of a different time and often a different place,
Yep.
and time moves on, and if
Yep.
they don't move with
They don't
them,
adapt.
how if they don't adapt,
Yeah.
how do they stay alive? So that's very interesting to me. I'm
Yeah.
gonna check that one out.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, actually, I just finished reading the book Blind Sight. Um, Blind Sight by, I'm gonna say, Peter Watts is the name in my head for the author, and if I'm wrong, then whoops. But Blind Sight is like it's a hard science fiction, like alien encounter science fiction. But one of the weird premises behind it is that human beings have discovered the DNA of vampires, the original predators for humans, and have revived them and then sent them into space, which is all kinds of wacky. And usually you don't hear that kind of thing in conjunction with people saying hard science fiction.
Hmm.
I'm still not sure how to feel about like whether or not that element can be justified as hard sci-fi, but oh well, it's a fun element in the book. But yeah, I do also like seeing how people play with different renditions of vampires and like how they can interact and get along in whatever kind of world people throw stuff at them. So yeah.
And what did you say? I'm writing this one down. Blind sight.
Blind Sight. Yep. All one word.
All right, I'm writing that one down. That one sounds fun. Um, yeah, I love when the many different iterations you have, the Bram Stokers and uh, um, the classical vampire where they come from Transylvania and stuff like that,
Mhm.
and where you don't really know a lot about them. Then you have the more like you were just talking about, the science fiction type where vampirism is a disease
Yeah.
that you catch, and that's interesting,
Mhm.
and things like that. And then how it goes into comic books like Blade and
Yeah.
things like that. It's just there's so many different ways to tackle. I heard, I don't know if it's an actual book or it was an idea that someone had, where vampires were a part of the evolutionary table, and that once when people would get too overpopulated, they would pop up
Hmm.
and wipe out a bunch of people, and then they'd go dormant again. It was pretty interesting. I forget where I heard that, but I don't know if it was an actual book or a future book. But
I would
just
not be surprised if it's a book in some form. Yeah.
yeah, all that stuff is pretty cool. So for you to tackle it from the vampire's point of view, it is pretty unique because usually, yeah, we're trying to survive them. They're not trying to survive us.
Right.
We're their
Yep.
food.
Or if it's a vampire POV story, it's like the vampire is a big bad, but there's somebody who's even bigger bad. It's like
Hmm.
this vampire must save the world from Cthulhu or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, or you get the romance side. But I don't know. I wanted to I wanted to play with a lot of the urban fantasy elements, but have the vampire learn how to survive the hunters.
So how is that arranged? Is it one continuous story, like a single novel, or is it a collection of stories, or
Yeah, Zone's also going to be an anthology.
okay?
It's more tightly controlled. It's a more like sort of restrictive style of story for an anthology because
Hmm.
I want for all the stories to feasibly seem like they could fit into our world, but in a hidden world way. Um, so we've got um, you know we've got a range of stories at the moment, but most of them are clustered right around like the last 20 years or so. And
Hmm.
I'm hoping to get more installments from yesteryear and just like plant vampires into different chunks of history and
Hmm.
not necessarily changing the outcome of history, not changing it as the textbooks know it, but let's add another element in there. So like the proposal that I've given that nobody has turned in, by the way, yet, I would still love to see this. The idea that like Al Capone's racket was basically just a front for vampire blood trafficking.
Hmm.
And I think that would be hilarious. Like if there's some kind of a vampire mob thing that's set up in whatever kind of early-ish era where they're trafficking human blood and they're fronting it as like we're going to pretend that we're tracking liquor because that's more excusable.
Yeah. And yeah, just about any point in history where there's like mass death or disease or something like that. It's like, oh yeah, no, they had the flu and they died. And it could be, vampires.
Yep.
Sucking the life out of them.
Yeah.
So no, that's all. I'm excited about that. I want to read that. I like vampires. So with this Kickstarter, so it's Kickstarter. Somebody patronizes you. What do they? If someone, are there tiers? Or there? I'm unfamiliar as how Kickstarter works. So if you would enlighten me.
Yeah. And I'll note in advance that it's a little bit different for every Kickstarter. But the way that a lot of author Kickstarters or publisher Kickstarters are broken down is they will have a book or a series, and then some of the main tiers are going to be like, pledge this amount and get the ebook. So like for art here, I'm going to pull this thing up so that I do not misquote myself because I might otherwise. So like, an ebook of either of the things is $8 on the Kickstarter. So you pledge $8, it's kind of just like getting it in advance, and you go from there. Then there's a little bit of like mix and match. So we've got the e-bundler, get both of them. Or actually, no, in our case, the e-bundler is Murderbugs, Murderbirds, and the Vampire Survival Guide. And so we're, bundling, 3 for the price of 2 on that. Or there are tiers up higher where you can get paperback versions or, once again, paperback bundles. And Kickstarter is also an opportunity to put in some like cool stuff in advance, because we haven't actually clicked go on publication yet.
Okay.
We're editing the stories and putting the thing together. So one of the things that we like to offer is tuckerizations. So people can pledge a certain tier in order to get their name inserted into a story. And that can be a lot of fun. So you can pledge to either like, Murderbugs or the Vampire Survival Guide and get your name inserted. And then, we play around with some other weird and fun stuff in there. So like one of them that is already gone, we have the Future Fish Aficionado. That's one of our unique high tiers. And the idea is that, somebody pledges that one, cool, they get all the stuff for this Kickstarter. And also they're going to be giving us the prompts for the fish story. So like genre, type of fish, and it's like, cool, we will write a bespoke fish story, which I think is just a great way of getting involved. And it's like, and that's one of the things that I like about the Kickstarter vibe. It is very much community forward. It's like, how do we get people involved and interacting in the story and get them excited about it? So along those lines, we're doing one for the Vampire Survival Guide in a similar way. So there's, a bespoke vampire story. And then something we wanted to play with for the dedication page is basically having an illustrated dedication page where we're like, pledge this amount, get the book dedicated to your pet, and we will, have there'll be a commissioned hand drawing of your pet with a bug of your choice featured in the illustration.
That's pretty good.
And I think that'd just be funny. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff where it's like, how do we just make this fun? How do we play with it? Because you can't do that kind of stuff like, after it's already published, and you can't necessarily do it like at a convention. I mean, if people know how, then that sounds wonderful. Let me know. And also figuring out ways to integrate that in conventions. But yeah, so it's been a fun platform to be able to play with.
Well, and it's also a great way to get buy-in from your fans, because they have a stake in it now. Especially with some of those giveaways and tuckerizations and things like that.
Yeah, and hitting stretch goals, because like as the stretch goals go up, you get more stuff. Like there's more swag that goes out to folks, and also like, we're gonna. So Alex Schwartzman is one of the authors that I talked to about getting a vampire story, and like, kind of open book here. Like he's out of my price range right now. Like we're a small press. WonderBird Press is not very big, and so I talked to him like how much can you do this for? Like, what's your rate? And based on his rate, I was like, cool. Can I set you up at this stretch goal? If we hit this stretch goal, then we get a vampire story from Alex Schwartzman. So, yeah,
that's really awesome.
Like that, yeah.
So you mentioned writer groups and things like that. I'm assuming these aren't all in person. They're online.
Most of them seem to be online these days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is how you're getting most of your authors, or?
Yeah. So for Murderbirds and Muderbugs, I went entirely through author education and support groups. So I'm like, I am still a teacher. I haven't managed to completely shed the day job. I would love to, but I haven't yet. So, I like the education approach. So working with groups like Superstars Writing Seminars and with Apex Writers Group, and TWT, the Writing Tribe, which I believe they're converting to the Writers Troop these days, so it might change. These kinds of like interactive support group cohorts that have different classes and seminars and stuff. A lot of the people who are there in those groups, they're actively invested in continuing to improve themselves as writers. And so it already creates that sort of like buy-in and community vibe. And I like getting stories from them. I like getting stories from people who, are kind of regularly in the submission circuit. And part of the reason for that also is because when I've worked as a slush reader with different publishers, I hear people talk about how they put out the open call for an anthology everywhere, and they get tons of stories in that have nothing to do with what they're talking about. And they end up working with like 90% people they already know and I've worked with anyway. And like, okay, well, if that's the case, like I've got some good group connections, and there are some excellent authors here, so I'll start there.
And were you saying you have some international authors? It's not just the U.S.?
For Murderbugs, it is mostly U.S. I think we've got 2 Canadian authors in Murderbird. Oh wait, no, we've got 1 in Germany now.
Okay.
So 2 Canadian, 1 in Germany. Murderbirds, we had somebody in Sweden, somebody in the UK, in Wales, somebody in Greece. Yeah.
Okay.
So we got a little bit of movement there. So yeah, we haven't gone huge international yet, but
that's cool because for one thing, you're giving people an opportunity, and that's real cool. You're helping your community, and I enjoy the fact that you're sharing how you get a hold of these people, where you're getting a hold, through these educational groups and everything. And I think that's important because a lot of people, you just do this, you just do that, but nobody connects A to Z. They just and I feel that's important these days, especially for independent authors and publishers and artists in general. It's not a zero-sum game. Nobody's just going to look at your stuff or look at somebody else's stuff and not look at your stuff. People are voracious and they want content. And so for you to help people, get potentially known, that's great, man. I really appreciate people that do that kind of stuff for other people.
Well, and that's also one of the things that I really like about the CKP group, and one of the big reasons that I bought in and wanted to write stuff in the shared universes there. So writing in like the Four Horsemen universe, and like being able to go to conventions where I'm meeting up with CKP folks and we've read a lot of each other's books and we can like pitch them around to different people who are coming up to the booths. I think that's a great thing. Yeah.
So speaking of, who do we have from CKP? So you did hit up the CKP group. We got Casey Moores, otherwise known as Moops, in there for this one. Did you have any in the original, in the first anthology, or?
Let's see. We might. I'm trying to remember who overlaps with what at this point. So sometimes it's hard to keep track.
It's a lot of people.
Yep. Well, and let's see. And there's an author in Murderbugs, Mike Wyatt Jr., who had originally published the Legion Convergence with CKP as well.
Yeah.
On the Vampire Survival Guide front, I've got a couple of proposals in from people that I have not yet gone through the list, and I think one of them is a CKP person, but I shouldn't say that yet because we don't know anything on contract yet. So I mean, it would be great to get more CKP people involved as well.
So I've noticed you've been doing these author spotlights and here's just a few of them where you're telling about the authors and their story and you're highlighting them. So you're going to have a total of 20 authors. So are all the stories in for Murderbugs?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
For Murderbugs, it is a full cast of 20. Yep.
Okay. And so, when is the expectation for Murderbugs to be deployed and published?
Merch is what I've been telling people. I would love to have it done earlier. Like, the hope is to have all of the edits in and all of the illustrations in by the end of November, so that we can just be like, cool, done, move on from there. We also got a couple of guest illustrators who are popping in from overlapping communities as well, who don't have stories in there, but they're going to be illustrators. So like that's nice as well. That we get kind of continue the group vibe. But yeah, I'm hoping that I will have copies of that one in hand by the time like the sort of the February conference and convention circus starts up.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't say circus, I should say circuit, but you know what, circus is fine.
Yeah,
By the time the convention circuit starts up,
yeah,
it's a bit chaotic. So yeah,
the chaos that is conventions.
Yeah, I doubt that I will have it out by the time I hit Mars Con, but like, hey, if I do, that would be great. Yeah.
So, how are things going with the Kickstarter? Where are we? What kind of help do you need, and all that stuff? Do you need more, contributors or?
It's always great to get more pre-sales. So we're at the 4,900 mark. So the next couple tiers that we're aiming at have to do with more illustrations, so getting the fully illustrated Murderbugs as opposed to the partially illustrated Murderbugs, and that one's at 5,400. And then the Vampire Survival Guide story by Alex Schwartzman, that's going in at 6,000. And then from there, we've got some things like the authors of the anthologies are going to be paid more cents per word, so we've got some bits going up. I mean, ideally, as high as we can get over the next 3 days, the better. Because the more the word is spread, the more there's a vote of confidence on these pieces, the easier it will be to like continue to have forward momentum on the next piece. Like the easier it will be to know that like, we can put out the call and pay the authors for the next couple anthologies. Because realistically speaking, like, but these anthos, anything that we make over our costs is just going into the next anthology to start it up. So we're kind of in that model right now.
And going back to the
boosting signal, yeah.
Wait, say again.
Sharing and boosting the signal. That's going to be, yeah.
No, that's awesome. I love this kind of stuff because it's it's almost like it's the rising tide. You're all helping each other out. You're putting out, and it's not like you just say, "Oh, please give me money." No, you're giving them something for their money, and it sounds very entertaining. And then speaking of the illustrations, I stole some of these from your Facebook.
Awesome.
And these are some of your drawings here, which are pretty cool, man. I gotta say, these are pretty good.
Thank you.
What is this?
That is a wheel bug. That is the Virginia version of the assassin bug. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we have some of those guys that hang out around our garden.
Oh, this is for real?
This is for real.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, no, they look nasty, and some of them, like, thankfully not in our area as much, but just a little bit further east of us, so when you get closer to like Williamsburg or like Virginia Beach area, they get a little bit longer, and it's like you can see these things like like 2 inches long. Just like, man, that would hurt if they bit. But yeah, that is an assassin bug.
No, if I saw that bug, I would run the other way.
Yep.
And then this is a mantis.
Yep.
Yeah, man, you're pretty good, man.
Thank you.
This is awesome. So there is a tangent. Sorry. There is a Instagram account, probably TikTok too. And I think it's called "What the F is that?" Except he says the whole world, and
sure.
It's just random animals that sometimes I've never seen, and bugs that I've never seen, are just gigantic bugs. So if you want ideas, maybe go look that up.
Okay.
And
I'll make a note. That's
because he showed me some stuff. I'm like, oh no, if I saw that.
And if nobody has submitted the sarcastic fringe head fish to that site yet, the sarcastic fringe head should be there.
So, Murderbugs.
Murderbugs.
What as far as characters, let's call them, the bugs, what sticks out to you? What are some of the fun bugs that you can talk about?
Well, so there are 2 preview stories available right now. So like, free to read if people want to check it out and get a sense of it. One of them that I think is really fun. It's called "You Are the Mother of Doomsday."
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a scarab beetle lore thing, but it's a sci-fi story about like, let's say like 20 years ago during some portion of a tech revolution, where a programmer has seen a hidden code involving a scarab beetle, and the scarab beetle starts talking to her and basically telling her that like the code she's created is going to destroy the world, and basically sends her on a kind of crazed rampage. It is an awesome story, and there's literally a code embedded in it. There's like a secret hidden scramblable message in the story. um and so yeah, so what I talk to the author. I'm like, hey, I want to put this one up as a preview, and we're going to use that as like a sort of a mini hype campaign. Basically have people go in there, solve the riddle, and like email us to let us know that they've solved the riddle.
That's pretty cool.
And like get some kind of swag for it. And so like, the first person who claimed it, they're getting a Tuckerization, so their name's going to be planted into a story in Murderbugs. So yeah, that was fun. Candace Lyle is an author. I've read some of her stuff before, and I'm like great to be able to work with her. She wrote a story called The Telltale Cricket, which definite homage to the Poe story Telltale Heart. And the opening premise is literally about somebody who is hearing an incessant chirp of a cricket in their house and can't find where the cricket is. Let chaos ensue.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So Telltale Heart meets like Mouse Hunt with with a cricket. And then we've got a few different versions of like space bugs that are fun to trot out. So like, there's a story from Lee Saunders called "Where All Memories Are One," and it's from the point of view of sort of like a hive mind insect collective, which I am always going to be fascinated by that kind of thing. I find it incredibly cool, to the point that even when it's supposed to be horrific, usually I'm just like, oh wow, this is awesome, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
That appeals to me. Yeah, but it's a good range. And a few different spider stories. Yeah, Casey's is about a like, I've been referring to it as a war widow because we've got 2 Black Widow stories. So Casey's a war widow, like military fantasy giant spider that's going through the lines and like trying to satisfy a voracious appetite. Meanwhile, the soldiers are trying to like basically point the widow at their enemies instead of taking it on themselves. But yeah, it's a fun bit.
All right. Well, the people in the chat say I'm ignoring them. So, one, Marisa, I think, has a suggestion for the fish with the human looking teeth. Have you heard of those?
I've seen images about fish with like weird teeth. I'm not sure if I know of ones that have teeth that look humanish, but that sounds fun too.
I've seen it. It's freaky looking. And you already mentioned the stretch goals, so we already talked about that. And yeah, that's it. All right.
Yeah.
So there you go. You got your limelight, people. So now talking about the Vampire Guide. What are your hopes for that one to go live?
Yeah, so the Vampire Survival Guide, it's something that I have not yet pulled in enough stories to, it's not complete yet.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be pulling in most of the stories after the Kickstarter, and some of this is an experiment. Like, we got the stories for Murderbugs in advance and are launching the Kickstarter with that in mind and with the hope to be able to increase pay. Mm-hmm. And with the Vampire Survival Guide, we're doing it on the other end. We're getting the funding first and then putting it together, and we're seeing how it balances out. Mm-hmm. But with the Vampire Survival Guide, I'm looking for stories that will be able to give like sort of a fun, quirky lesson at the end of it, even if the story is really serious. Like at the end of it, to be able to say like, and that's how I learned.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of each story, I'm planning on having like basically a bumper sticker length. This is what was learned. So that if there was any doubt about what you're supposed to figure out as a vampire, having read this thing, yeah. So I would love to see more from different eras. Um, I would like to see vampires integrated into different kinds of lore. So like if there's a lore around a cryptid that people are, or like I don't know, find a way to insert vampires into the whole Roswell thing. Like
Hmm.
if somebody mistook vampires as aliens and then spun the story out of control, or maybe one of the vampires was one of the spin doctors who made a point of saying
Oh,
like,
yeah.
no, it was aliens. Um, so yeah, I want to see stuff like that. I want to see stuff where people are able to play with history that doesn't necessarily change what's in the history books, but kind of gives it a wink and a nod and says, "This is what
Yeah,
this
well,
is what really
alternate
happened."
history. Yeah,
Yeah.
I love What If,
Hmm.
and I like vampires. So yes, great combination. And Marisa came back, and that fish is called a sheep's head
Okay. Or a sheep shed.
or a
I think
sheep's
sheep's
head.
head is probably more accurate, but a sheep
Yeah,
shed sounds fun too.
either way, they're freaky looking fish. And but no, the alternate history or vampires in history, uh, I'm down. I love that kind of stuff. So um, we've got Murderbugs. Everything, it seems to be going well. We're looking at a March release where when so you're gonna do your next Kickstarter about this time next year.
Yeah, we're thinking about moving a little bit earlier.
Hmm.
And some of this is because, well, there are a lot of different Kickstarters that people launched this fall, some of which are in similar themes, and we're like, that's probably not a good overlap for visibility. So we're probably going to aim to go for like end of summer next year. And I will also say, as somebody who's bound by the school year, that's probably more helpful for me too.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, but the plan is to have the Vampire Survival Guide come out before Halloween next year. So by this time next year, we're hoping to have the Vampire Survival Guide all done and compiled and released and sent to the people who backed it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I'm excited. If you can't tell, I'm excited about that one. That one sounds good.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm really gonna enjoy that one. And for those who missed it at the beginning, we have the link for the Kickstarter in the comments. Here it is. Here it's also in the show notes. So go check that out. Don't miss it. Now we're getting close to the top of the hour or the end of the hour here, and you're. Let's talk about some of your other writings before we leave, because you're a fairly prolific writer. In addition to, uh, you know, uh, orchestrating anthologies and writing in anthologies. Of course, you're on this show because you're a fellow CKPer, and we appreciate you coming on. So let's talk about some of your other books and where people can find those and all that stuff.
Sounds great. Yeah. Yeah. So like the This Fine Crew series is my main series with CKP. Starting with Signal Out of Space is book one there, which is also available in German and French. Yeah, and so those are all available on Amazon, or if you go to my website, you can funnel your way to those. And along with that, there are two prequel stories. The easiest one to find is Roach by Any Other Name, and A Roach by Any Other Name is also on Amazon. And then in the CKP's shared universes, uh, I've got a 4HU novel out, Defender's Rise,
Mhm.
and I don't have image of that on hand. I have
Mhm.
a convenient book. So Defender's Rise, if you like, furry uplift creatures leading revolutions against much larger aliens, that's where that one is. I am currently writing the sequel for that. I do not have anything in the CKP tubes at the moment, but currently
Awesome.
writing the sequel on that, and still putting feelers out there for like co-writing opportunities with the CKP group. Like that's definitely
Mhm.
something where like at this point I want to find somebody to link up with and like
It's a
do
great group to do that with too.
those. Yeah. What's that?
It's a great group to do that with too,
Yeah.
because they're really big on partnering,
Yep.
whether you're new or established or what have you, and you tend to learn a lot.
Yep.
And on that book that he just showed you, we did a launch video on this channel. So if you want to learn more about that book, go watch that video, check it out, or just go buy the book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fast, fun read. And that one actually has like, I'm going to say like a midquel story. So there's a short story that's a follow up to Defender's Rise
Mhm.
called Opshaw Ops, and that's in the Phoenix Initiative first missions from earlier this year. Yeah.
Awesome. And so what other books do you have that are either out or coming out, that whether it's with CKP or not? What else you got going on?
Well, so I've been doing some mini releases along the way because I'm working on longer series pieces behind the scenes right now. But I did a release in August or the beginning of September, which was Dead of Night. And yeah, there it goes. Yeah, Dead of Night, sci-fi thriller novelette. So if you want a short read, like, one sitting read that which you're going to be able to get a murder mystery in space, then
Mhm.
awesome. That's where that is. And because that one was a lot of fun to write and following up on it at the end of this month, so around the Halloween time, if you want another murder mystery in space, I've got Murder on the Barge Inn, and that one I'm going to be starting the e-arc process for that one as soon as we wrap the Kickstarter. So like this Tuesday, I'm going to start sending out the advanced reader copies on that one, and then planning on hitting launch for it uh, right before the Halloween weekend. So probably around like the 26th to 27th, so that I can get another novella out there.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And who are those? What publisher are those through?
That's the same publisher as the Murderbirds stories.
Okay.
So that's still WonderBird Press.
Okay.
Um, yep. So kind
Awesome.
of building up the list bit by bit. So going building blocks at a time.
Okay. So you've got that one coming out soon. What else is in the future for Mike Jack Stoumbos?
Well, I'm going to keep doing the anthology editing under Mike Jack Stoumbos, and I'm
Mhm.
going to continue this fine crew. I have put this fine crew on hiatus
Mhm.
because, well, there were other projects that I wanted to try to knock out and get forward. Um, but most likely, I'm gonna have Mike Jack Stoumbos stay as the like editor teacher name, and I'm gonna start moving into a couple other pen names.
Oh.
Which I'm not gonna really try to hide too much of the veil. I'm just like I'm looking to create something that's going to be a little bit more YA focused that I can launch through WonderBird Press. Um, and so one of the ones that I've been working on for that, and I'm hoping to have the series in a launchable form probably by the end of next year, or at least the start of the series in a launchable form by the end of next year, uh, is sort of like a virtual reality world, like reality TV show, so VR TV.
Hmm.
Uh, I've been referring to it as Ready Player One for Survivor superfans, and I call it Bootstrapped Buccaneers. Uh, it's been fun. It's been a really fun one to play with, and that one's probably going to be like the debut novel for the new pen name. But like I said, I've been working on like sort of building series of probably around like more novella length than novel
Hmm.
behind the scenes so that I can get some launches going in a slightly different direction pen name wise. But yeah, Mike Jack Stoumbos will continue with this fine crew, a couple more 4HU pieces, and editing the anthologies.
So for this fine crew, what is your vision of what would a complete series look like, number of books wise?
Well, I originally planned the first trilogy, and then when the first trilogy was like, cool, it seems like this has enough of a following to keep going. I planned out 4, 5, and 6, each as sort of like standalone episodes, continuing away missions, um, and and like sometimes things just don't get as much exposure as you want, or they don't land as well, and
Hmm.
like I didn't end up with enough readership for book 4 to feel like book 5 was the highest priority. So I'm like, all right, there are things that I'm going to work on in between time. There are things that I'm going to try to shore up, and then the hope is to write 5 and 6 pretty close together.
Hmm.
I'm I'm like 40,000 words into 5 by the time I
Wow.
pause. So jumping back in, it's not going to take too long of a chunk of time to finish it.
Yeah.
Um, but if I can get 5 and 6 done together, so that we can do like a rapid release of those, possibly with like some short story or novella pieces along with, then that's probably a good way to go. And then I think I'm going to pause it there,
Hmm.
unless there's like enough of a following and enough of a demand to push further.
Hmm.
Luckily, with this fine crew, it is a Star Trek-esque universe. It is exploration science fiction, and the core 4 characters are a lot of fun to play with. They are always going to be able to create some kind of interesting perspective for looking at a new bizarre type of alien or type of science or type of like cosmic phenomena, what you will. Where I could keep going with different missions. So I have some things that I could do with them,
Mhm.
but if there's not as much of a following for the series, then I might take some of those ideas and throw them in a different direction.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
No, that's
maybe
cool.
might end up going into something 4-H or into something salvage universe, because that might be where those ideas will find a better home faster.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing, is that there's no bad ideas. You just got to find a good home for it.
Yeah.
So now, what is your for your YA stuff with the Survivor combination with Ready Player One? What's your research for that? Are you just watching a lot of reality TV? And
So I will say, for years, I have definitely been a Survivor super fan.
uh-huh.
That is something that I'm willing to just put out there. And I'm also one of the people who like analyze the crap out of the game.
Hmm.
Um, Along with that, on the VR front, so I've written a number of VR short stories and novellas that I've sold to different places. So I've got like 6 different stories in this VR setting in this place called If World. And the base premise of If World is that in the nearish future, people have figured out how to make virtual reality feel real enough, and how to make the like basically the tanks that we put ourselves in sustainable enough that people can just go in there and live a lot cheaper, minimize their carbon footprint, so on and so forth. And so they just do it. And so there's like a fairly permanent mass migration into VR world, and everyone's living in If. So I've got stories in If World. I've got 4 of them out right now, and I think 2 more of them that have been sold that are going to be published in the next couple months. And for the research on that, that was actually done a couple years ago. A buddy of mine through university was working on like VR for prosthetics. So it was like a very scientific approach. And so and I was a volunteer. I was a study volunteer for them.
Hmm.
And so yes, I would go in and do like whatever kinds of like anytime I would see any kind of study in VR that was not video game focused,
Hmm.
I would go there and I would try to figure out how things felt and how things were being developed and like sort of what the next stages were. So I'm not sharing anything proprietary because I don't know anything proprietary,
Right, right.
but I know some stuff about sort of like the user interface and like some of the kinks that people were trying to work out and some of the end goals, to be able to make like what you look at or where you start to gesture feel more real and like have the haptic sensors work exactly right and stuff. And so it was just like it was fun.
That's
Yeah. But yeah, one of the things that I want to trot out along with this this VR TV thing, um, I've been building sort of the platforms for. I know I'm not going to technically use the choose your own adventure thing because that phrase is technically copywritten, but some version of choose a path.
hmm
And things in the game lit variety, I think, lend themselves well to that. Where like you are the main character of this, you're trying to make it through these levels. You're selecting A and B, and the more things become e-reader based books, the more viable it is to click option A, click option B, and it will internally link you somewhere else in the book.
Oh,
So
awesome.
along with putting out the book itself, to be able to have a follow-up where it's like, all right, now that you've read this, they're going to launch a next season. How would you play through in the next season? New cast of characters, but you know the premise.
That is awesome. So
Yeah.
that would be good. If you have an online presence for the future books in that series, and people can kind of put in games or strategies, things they'd like to see. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a great idea, and
Yeah.
a lot of buy-in that way too.
I think so, yeah. And the more interactive I make it, like probably the more fun it'll be. Like if I can have whatever amount of super fans, you know, basically posting fan theories, I will use those as much as possible. If
Hmm.
they're like, this character should have won this last season, I'm like, all right, I'll keep that in mind.
Hmm. Yeah, that's pretty
I think
cool.
that's great. Like, yeah, and the VR TV, or sorry, the reality TV world and community, they're so active in terms of like how they like to share stuff and what they like to debate. So like it just seems like a fun thing to tap into.
Okay. And then one last thing. This is just for me. The VR prosthetic study that you were talking about. So that's using VR to operate prosthetics and making the connection to the person more lifelike, like more like they can.
Yeah.
It's like it's their limb that they're using.
Yeah, basically, yeah. It was so it was I'm not on any kind of like crazy NDAs on this, so like I can give sort of general commentary. That said, I don't want to get into hot water by giving specifics.
Right.
But yeah, it was so it was through a university's sort of like research projects around using elements of VR to basically try to map motion that people are making. So if somebody does not need a prosthetic and they're doing some kind of motion, what is the natural motion? What is the natural location? Like where will they interact with stuff based on where they're looking and the eye line match and the haptic sensors and stuff like that. And it's just like,
that's very cool.
It was very cool. It was a good thing to be able to like experience and try to think through. So yeah, I mean, for the novel that I'm currently working on, like very little of that research is actually filtering in. I'm just playing with it. But in some of the short stories, that was something that was like, okay, I can use this experience to directly inspire stuff. So yeah.
And so before we leave, Murderbugs, go sign up for the Kickstarter. You'll find the link in the comments. You'll find it in the show description. Go check it out. Support these artists and what they're doing. I think it's a great idea, and you can get some cool stuff to go along with it. And before we go, can people catch you out in the wild anytime soon?
I'm gonna be at it's a one-day Richmond Comic-Con in November, but otherwise I'm not doing much travel at the moment. I'm sticking pretty close to home and like trying to take care of stuff behind the scenes.
Awesome.
It's been a busy season, but I think the next time I'm officially going to anything where I'm traveling at all is MarsCon in January.
Okay, awesome. Well, Mike, I really appreciate you coming on today. I think you're doing great work. Keep it up, and I wish nothing for but the best for you. And I think you're going to be successful. So people go out, support them, and let's get some of these authors famous, and that way he can stop teaching if he wants to.
Yeah. Please share the Kickstarter, and if there are authors here who are watching this that want to submit vampire stories, contact me.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll close with this image. I do love the cover for these. It's pretty cool. And but with that, to everybody watching live and in the future, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time.